On my 69th birthday, my wife took me into our study, shut the door, and told me 2 of my children weren't mine. They belonged to the man who lived next door. She said it like she was reading the weather, and she said it 5 minutes before I was supposed to walk into the dining room and announce I'd just sold $30 million worth of securities for our future. What would you do if you were me? Before you judge what I did next, read to the end, then tell me if you think I went too far. My name is Michael Humphrey. I'm 69 years old, a grandfather, and I built my life the slow way. Decades of early mornings, careful investments, and a stubborn belief that family was the only thing you couldn't replace. That belief died in my study on my birthday, and I walked out wearing a smile I didn't feel. I smiled, got in my car, and made one call. The house was already full when the truth hit. My daughter, Claire, was arranging flowers on the dining table like it mattered. My oldest son, Evan, was pouring bourbon like he owned the place. My younger son, Luke, was helping my grandkids hang a banner that said, "Happy Birthday, Pop Pop," in crooked glitter letters. My wife, Diane, was perfect. Always perfect. Hair done, nails immaculate, voice soft enough to be mistaken for kindness. And next door, like he had been for 27 years, Mark Holloway was outside trimming his hedges in a clean white shirt. He looked up when my youngest grandchild waved at him through the window. He waved back, smiling like he belonged to us. I'd planned this night for months. Not the party. Those were Diane's performances, her way of proving to other women that she still had control over everything. I planned what came after. 2 days earlier, my broker had closed the final sale. $30 million in securities, liquidated at the right time, with the taxes managed, the paperwork clean. It was the kind of move people spent a lifetime dreaming about, and then ruined with arrogance. I wasn't arrogant. I was careful. I wanted to announce that the money was going to be used to secure the family, trusts for the grandkids, a foundation, a safety net nobody could gamble away or marry into. I wanted to tell them that everything I'd ever done had been for them. Diane knew that. She also knew the one time a man like me was vulnerable, when he thought he was celebrating. She caught me in the hallway before dinner, fingers around my elbow like a wife guiding her husband, steering me away from everyone. "Michael," she said, "we need to talk privately. Now." There was something strange in her eyes. Not fear, not shame, calculation. I followed her into the study. The door closed. The laughter from the dining room became muffled, distant, like a different life. She sat on the leather chair across from my desk. Not my chair, not a guest chair. The chair she used when she wanted power in the room. "I'm going to tell you something," she said, "and you're going to stay calm because if you don't, you'll humiliate yourself in front of your children." "My children," I repeated because that word mattered to me. She nodded once. Then she said it. "Evan and Claire are not yours." At first I didn't understand. My brain refused to accept the shape of the sentence. "Not yours." She kept going, because she needed it to land. "They're Mark's. Mark, next door. Uncle Mark at barbecues. Mark who brought over a casserole when my mother died. Mark who shook my hand with both of his, eyes earnest, voice warm. Mark who watched my kids grow up and never missed a birthday party." My throat tightened, but I didn't speak. Diane watched me carefully, like she was watching a stock price move. "It happened a long time ago," she said. "I was lonely. You traveled. You were always building something. He was available." I stared at the framed family photo on the shelf. Me, Diane, the kids. A perfect picture of a lie. "How long?" I asked, because my voice still worked even if my heart didn't. 28 years, she said. On and off. Mostly off. But it doesn't matter. What matters, she continued, leaning forward, is what you're about to announce. My stomach turned cold. She knew about the sale. Of course she did. She didn't handle the finances, but she listened through doors and watched my calendar like a hawk. "I'm not letting you lock that money away," she said. "Not in your name. Not in some trust where I have to beg my own children for access." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. "You lied for nearly 3 decades, I said softly. "You let me raise children that weren't mine." "They are yours," she snapped, then caught herself and softened again. "Emotionally, practically. You did the job. Mark did the other part." The words were clinical, cruel in the way only someone close to you can be cruel. "I'm going to tell them tonight," she said. "Unless you agree to what I'm asking." I felt my pulse in my fingertips. "What are you asking?" She smiled a little, like she'd won. "Half. Immediately. And control over how the rest is used. Or I tell them the truth in front of everyone. You'll be the pathetic old man who didn't even know who was in his own bed." For a moment I couldn't breathe. I thought about Evan. 42 years old, stubborn like me, proud like me. The boy who used to climb onto my shoulders at football games. I thought about Claire. 39, sharp, ambitious, the one who called me every time she needed advice and said, "I trust you more than anyone." I thought about the grandkids, little hands, warm hugs, a banner with glitter, and I thought about Mark's wave through my window. Diane leaned back again. "Decide fast," she said. "They're waiting." The injustice wasn't just the affair, it was the audacity. The idea that after stealing my life she could still demand the keys to what I built. I looked down at my phone on the desk. I'd been using it earlier to check messages. It was still on. I picked it up, turned the screen slightly so she couldn't see, and tapped one button. Record. Then I looked back at her and gave her what she wanted. Calm. "You want half," I said, steady. "You want control." "Yes. And if I refuse, you tell them tonight." "Yes." "And Evan and Claire?" "They're Mark's." "Yes," she said again, and there was no tremor in her voice. "Finally, you understand." I nodded slowly, as if I was accepting terms. "Okay," I said. Her shoulders loosened, the first crack in her perfect composure. "Good," she said. "Then you'll do it quietly. We'll talk to an attorney after—" "No," I interrupted gently. "We'll talk now, but not the way you think." She frowned. "What do you mean?" I stood up. "Go fix your makeup," I said. "Tell everyone dinner will start in 10 minutes. I'll be right behind you." Diane stared at me, confused, suspicious. "You're taking this better than I expected," she said. I smiled at her, an old man's harmless smile. The smile I used on arrogant young men who thought they were smarter than me. "I'm tired," I said. "I don't want a scene on my birthday." She studied me for another moment, then stood. "Smart," she said, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind her. The moment I was alone, the smile fell off my face like something dead. I listened to the muffled voices outside. Laughter, plates, the clink of glass. I stared at the recording timer still counting up. Then I made my second call. Not to a lawyer, not yet. To my private security company. The same one I'd paid for quietly after a string of burglaries in the neighborhood. The same one with cameras already installed around my property, including the side yard that faced Mark Holloway's back gate. "Michael Humphrey," the dispatcher answered. "This is Michael," I said. "I need a team here tonight. Discreet. Now." There was a pause. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said. "And I want every camera feed saved. Every minute." When I hung up, I walked to my desk drawer and pulled out a slim black folder. It wasn't labeled. It didn't need to be. Inside were documents I'd prepared months ago, because men like me don't accidentally accumulate $30 million. We plan. We anticipate. A trust agreement, a list of beneficiaries, a list of trustees, and a sealed envelope with my handwritten note. I'd expected tonight to be joyful. Instead, it was going to be surgical. I stepped out of the study and walked into the dining room with my practiced smile. Everyone cheered. They sang to me. They put a candle in front of me like I was a child again. Diane stood behind my chair, hands on my shoulders, the portrait of devotion. Mark Holloway knocked on the back door halfway through appetizers. I watched Diane's eyes flicker toward the sound. "Neighbor's here," Luke said, grinning. "Uncle Mark never misses your birthday, Dad." The word uncle scraped something raw inside me. "Let him in," I said, my voice smooth. Luke opened the door, and Mark came in carrying a bottle of wine like he belonged at my table. "Happy birthday, Michael," he said, stepping close. "Heard you've got a big announcement tonight." Diane's lips tightened for half a second. Mark glanced at her, quick, almost invisible. A look passed between them, not a married couple's look, a conspirator's. I shook his hand. His palm was warm, confident, the grip of a man who thought he was safe. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Sit, have a drink." He sat. My family laughed. They ate. They told stories about me, and all I could hear was Diane's voice in my study. "Evan and Claire are not yours. Half. Immediately. Control." I waited until dinner was halfway done, until everyone was relaxed, until the room felt warm with wine and nostalgia. I waited until Diane's guard dropped. Then I stood up with my glass. Everyone quieted. My granddaughter Lily, 9 years old, observant in a way that made me uneasy sometimes, looked at me like she was trying to read my face. I looked back at her and forced a gentler smile. "This is a special birthday," I began. "Not because of the number, because of what I wanted to do for the family." Evan leaned forward, interested. Claire smiled, eyes bright. Luke nodded. Diane's hand rested on my arm possessively like she was claiming what I was about to say. Mark's gaze stayed fixed on me, too calm. I continued. "I sold securities this week," I said. $30 million worth. The room erupted in surprise. Gasps. A laugh from Luke. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth. "Dad?" Evan whistled. "That's serious money." Diane's fingers tightened on my arm. I raised my glass slightly. "I did it for one reason. Legacy." There it was. The word that makes people picture themselves in safety. I watched their faces, the way hope changes posture, the way greed hides behind gratitude. "And that money," I said, "is not going into anyone's personal accounts." Diane's expression froze. I saw it in the corner of my eye, the flicker of panic, the immediate recalculation. "It's going into trusts," I continued, "for the grandchildren, for their education, their first homes, their medical care, and a foundation for causes we care about." Luke's mouth opened in admiration. Evan nodded slowly, impressed. Claire's eyes shone with emotion. Diane's face stayed still, but her nails dug into my sleeve. Mark shifted in his chair. Then I said the next part. "And the trustees," I said, "are not who you think." Diane's hand slipped off my arm. Silence thickened. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "I wasn't going to mention this tonight," I said, voice steady. "But there's something else I learned today. Something that changes everything." Diane's eyes widened a fraction. Mark's jaw tightened. My family looked between us, confused. "What is this?" Evan asked. I looked directly at Diane. "Tell them," I said softly. She didn't move, didn't breathe. So I did it for her. I tapped the screen. And Diane's voice filled the dining room, clear, unmistakable. "Evan and Claire are not yours. They're Mark's, half, immediately, control." The recording wasn't long, less than a minute, but it was enough to turn the air into something unlivable. When it ended, no one spoke. Claire's fork slipped from her fingers and clattered onto her plate. Evan's face went pale, then flushed red in a slow wave that climbed his neck. Luke stared at Diane like he didn't recognize her. My grandchildren, sensing something wrong, went quiet. Diane's lips parted, then closed again. Her eyes darted, searching for a way out, a story, a weapon. Mark stood up so fast his chair scraped hard against the floor. "That's—" he began. I held up a hand. "Sit down," I said. Mark didn't sit. He stepped toward me, eyes wild now, the calm mask cracking. "You can't play recordings like that," he hissed. "That's private." "Private?" I repeated, tasting the word. "Like the last 28 years. Diane found her voice, sharp and defensive. "You set me up," she spat. "You recorded me." I nodded once. "Yes." Evan's voice came out rough. "Mom, tell me this isn't true." Diane looked at him, and for the first time I saw something like fear. But she didn't deny it. She couldn't. Not with the recording hanging in the room like smoke. Claire's eyes were glassy. "Dad?" I turned to her, and it hurt. It hurt in a way I can still feel in my ribs when I wake up too early. "I raised you," I said. "That's the truth I know. And I'm sorry you're finding out this way." Mark lunged forward then, rage overriding sense. "You old man," he snarled, and his hand reached toward my phone like he could erase what happened. He didn't get close. Two men in plain clothes stepped into my dining room as if they'd been there all along. Security, quiet and professional, positioned near the doorway. One of them caught Mark's wrist mid-grab and pinned it down with controlled force. Mark yelped, shocked more by resistance than pain. Diane stared at them. "What is this?" I didn't look at her. I looked at Mark. "Sit," I said again, "or you leave in handcuffs." Mark's chest heaved. His eyes flicked to Diane, desperate. She didn't help him. She was already thinking about herself. Mark sat. The room was silent except for the shallow breathing of people trying not to fall apart. I could have ended it there. I could have walked away and let the family drown in the aftermath. But Diane had demanded half in control, and she'd chosen my birthday because she thought I'd be weak. So I finished it. "I have one more thing to announce," I said, voice calm, "because I want everyone to understand exactly what tonight is." Luke swallowed hard. "Dad?" I turned slightly, addressing the room like a board meeting, because emotion was trying to crack me open and I needed structure to keep standing. "The $30 million, I said, is already placed where it belongs. The documents were signed 3 days ago. The trustees are not Diane, not any of my children, not Mark. The trustees are professionals, independent, with strict rules." Diane's face changed. "You did what?" I nodded. "I did what I should have done years ago. I protected the family from anyone who thinks love is a lever." Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Mark, and I watched a lifetime of smug certainty crumble into panic. "That money," she began. "Is not yours," I said. Evan's hands clenched into fists. "Mom, you tried to extort him." Diane's eyes flashed. "I tried to protect myself. He would have left me with nothing." I laughed once, short and humorless. "You would have left me with nothing. You already did." Claire's voice came small. "What does this mean for us?" The question wasn't about money. Not really. It was about identity. About who you are when the ground under you shifts. I walked around the table slowly, past plates half-eaten, past candlelight that suddenly felt obscene. I stopped behind Evan and put my hand on his shoulder. "You are the man I raised," I said. "That doesn't change because of blood." Evan's jaw trembled. "Then why do this now?" "Because they were going to do it to you," I said, and my voice hardened. "Not just to me." Diane froze. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my pocket again and pulled out a small folded paper, a printed screenshot. My granddaughter Lily had slipped it into my hand 10 minutes before I stood up to speak. She'd done it quietly, eyes worried. I remembered her whisper. Pop, pop. Grandma told Uncle Mark to stop texting her. She said you'd get mad if you saw it. But I saw it anyway. That was the moment I knew it wasn't just an old affair. It was ongoing. It was active. It was planning. I unfolded the paper and placed it on the table where everyone could see. A text thread. Diane and Mark. Wait until he announces the sale. Then I file. Make sure he signs something tonight. He'll be emotional. If he won't, we can push the medical angle. Make him look unstable. The money first, then we tell them. Luke read it and went rigid. Evan read it and made a sound like something inside him snapped. Claire covered her mouth with both hands, shaking. Diane's face drained of color. Mark looked down, caught, cornered. I leaned forward, palms on the table. You weren't going to just confess, I said quietly. You were going to take. You picked my birthday because you thought I'd be soft. Diane's voice rose, desperate now. That's not what that means. Enough, I said. My grandkids were watching, wide-eyed and frightened. I didn't want them to remember this as screaming, as chaos. So I did what I'd always done in a crisis. I made decisions. I looked at Luke. Take the kids upstairs. Put on a movie. Tell them grown-ups are talking. Luke hesitated, eyes wet, then nodded. He gathered the children gently, guiding them away. When they were gone, the house felt colder. Diane swallowed hard. Michael, we can handle this privately. I stared at her. 27 years of marriage. 2 decades of birthdays. Thousands of mornings where she poured coffee into my cup and kissed my cheek like she meant it. And behind that, a second life. No, I said. We're handling it truthfully. Mark pushed his chair back again, trying to stand. The security man's hand settled on his shoulder, firm, warning. Mark stopped. I turned to him. You've lived next to me for 27 years, I said. You shook my hand. You came into my home. You sat at my table. You watched me raise children you knew were yours. Mark's mouth tightened. She told me she would tell you. When? I asked. After I was dead. He looked away. There was my answer. I turned to Diane. Go upstairs, I said. Pack a bag. She blinked. Excuse me? You're leaving my house tonight, I said. Her face twisted. It's our house. I nodded once. Not anymore. Her eyes flared. You can't just throw me out. I can, I said. And I am. She looked around the table, searching for support. Evan, Claire. Evan didn't look at her. His hands were shaking, fists clenched. Claire's tears were silent, falling down her cheeks, but her eyes held something new. Anger. Luke returned from upstairs a minute later, jaw tight. You're leaving, Luke told Diane. His voice was flat, stunned. You did this to us. Diane's face crumpled into something that might have been guilt, or might have been fear. Michael, she whispered, think about what you're doing. I leaned closer, keeping my voice low. I am thinking, I said. I'm thinking about the moment you decided I was just a wallet and a fool. I'm thinking about the years you let me believe I belonged. Then I straightened, and I looked at Mark. And you, I said. You're going to walk out that door and go back to your house. And tomorrow, you're going to learn what it feels like when a careful man stops protecting you. Mark's eyes narrowed. You're threatening me. No, I said. I'm promising you consequences. He scoffed, trying to find his confidence again. You have no proof of anything except an old recording and some texts, he said. You think you can ruin me because you're hurt. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I smiled, because he still didn't understand who he was dealing with. Mark, I said, when someone sits on a portfolio like mine, they don't do it by being impulsive. I turned to the security man. Escort him out, I said, and call the police if he puts a foot wrong. Mark's face shifted. Police? For what? For trespassing, I said calmly. You're no longer welcome in my home. He stood, breathing hard, eyes darting around like an animal looking for a way out. And then he made the mistake I expected. He pointed at Diane. She told me you wouldn't do anything, Mark snapped. She said you'd be too embarrassed. Diane flinched as if struck. I watched her face, and I saw it. The truth. She hadn't feared me. She'd despised me. She'd mistaken my discipline for weakness. Mark took one step toward me again, and this time his fist came up. The security man moved faster than thought, twisting Mark's arm behind his back and forcing him down. Mark hit the floor with a grunt, his cheek against my hardwood. Diane screamed. Evan surged forward, fury and grief mixing into something dangerous. "Get him off my father!" Evan roared, and it was the first time in years I'd heard him call me father with real meaning. The security man held Mark steady. I looked down at Mark on my floor. "Now," I said softly, "the police are coming." Mark's face went pale. Diane stood frozen, hands trembling. Claire stared at Mark like she wanted to disappear. Luke's voice broke. "Mom, what did you do?" Diane whispered, "I didn't think it would become this." That sentence told me everything about her. She didn't regret betrayal. She regretted losing control. The police arrived quickly. Quiet neighborhood, quick response. They took statements. Mark tried to talk his way out of it, but his wrist was already swelling, and the security footage would show exactly who moved first. When they led him out of my front door, Mark's face turned toward me. Pure hate. He opened his mouth, and the officer tightened his grip, warning him to stay quiet. Mark didn't look like a confident neighbor anymore. He looked like a man finally exposed. Diane stood in my hallway, a suitcase half-packed at her feet, hair slightly undone for the first time in decades. She looked older without the mask. "You're destroying everything," she said. I stared at her. "You destroyed it," I replied. "I'm just refusing to live under the rubble." She tried one last tactic, voice soft, pleading. "Michael, you love Evan and Claire. You love the grandchildren. You can't cut me out without cutting them." I felt something twist inside me at the thought of it. Then Claire stepped forward. "I love my children," Claire said, voice shaking. "And I loved you, Mom. But I don't know who you are." Diane's eyes filled with tears. For a second, I almost believed them. Then Evan spoke, low and brutal. "You didn't just cheat," he said. "You made him raise a lie. And you planned to take his money tonight like he was already dead." Diane's tears stopped mid-fall. Her face hardened again. There it was, the real Diane. "You're all ungrateful," she snapped. "You think he's a saint? You think he didn't neglect me for years while he obsessed over numbers and accounts?" I took one step toward her, voice calm. "You don't get to rewrite history to justify cruelty," I said. "You made choices. Now you live with them." She left. The door closed behind her, and for the first time in nearly 3 decades, the house felt like mine again. The next morning, I did what careful men do. I didn't rage. I didn't drink. I didn't post anything or shout it to the neighborhood. I met with my attorney and handed over the recording, the screenshots, the security footage. I also handed over something else, a file I'd quietly built over the last 12 hours while the house slept. Because when the shock wore off, I realized something. Mark Holloway didn't just betray me emotionally. He'd been circling my money. He'd asked questions over the years. Curious questions. The kind people ask when they're looking for a door that isn't theirs. About my broker. About my accounts. About when I planned to slow down. Those questions had felt like small talk. Now they felt like reconnaissance. I pulled bank logs. I compared timestamps. I checked who had been near my study when I was at the gym. And I found an attempted access on my home office computer at 1:14 a.m., 3 weeks earlier. Wrong password. Multiple tries. Locked out. Mark had been over that night, helping Luke fix the sprinklers, according to Diane. I wasn't certain what it meant yet, but I didn't need certainty to act. I had the trust documents already executed, already insulated, and I had a new priority: protect what remained, and protect the people who deserved protection. Evan and Claire came back to my house that afternoon, separately. Evan sat in my kitchen staring at his hands. "I don't know who I am," he said. I poured him coffee the way I used to when he was a teenager and something had gone wrong at school. "You are who you choose to be," I told him. He swallowed hard. "Am I still your son?" I looked him in the eye. "You're my son," I said. "Blood doesn't erase years. Betrayal does." His shoulders shook, and he cried quietly into his hands like a man who'd been holding his breath for 40 years. Claire arrived later, face swollen from tears, mascara washed away. She sat across from me at the dining table, the same table where Diane's voice had detonated the night before. "I keep thinking about every time Mark hugged me," she whispered. "Every time he looked at me like he was proud." I felt a sick kind of rage at the image. "That pride wasn't love," I said. "It was ownership." Claire squeezed her eyes shut. "Do you hate me?" she asked. "Because I'm not—" "Don't finish that," I said firmly. She flinched. I leaned forward. "I hate what they did," I said. "I hate what they stole. But you're still the girl I held at 3 a.m. when you had nightmares. You're still the one who brought me terrible macaroni necklaces in kindergarten and looked like you made a crown." A tear slid down her cheek. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You have nothing to apologize for," I replied. "They do." Over the next 2 weeks, Diane tried to crawl back through every crack she could find. She called. She texted. She showed up at the gate crying, then shouting, then threatening. She threatened to tell the grandkids. She threatened to take me for everything. She threatened to tell the neighborhood I was abusive. It was all noise, because the money she thought she could grab was already untouchable, because the family she thought she controlled had seen her face in candlelight, and because Mark Holloway, the man she hid behind, was suddenly busy dealing with his own life collapsing. The police report from my house didn't just stay a police report. Mark worked in compliance at a regional financial firm, one of those places that treats accusations like fire. When the firm learned he'd been arrested for assault, they suspended him. When they learned there was a claim of an ongoing affair tied to an attempted financial coercion, they opened an internal investigation. Mark's wife, because yes, he had one, found out in the ugliest way possible. She showed up at his house while he was still wearing the wrist brace from my dining room floor, and she didn't scream. She just handed him a bag and told him to leave. I heard it from my kitchen window as I washed dishes. Mark standing on his porch, sweating, pleading. His wife silent, eyes empty. She slammed the door. For years, Mark had walked around our neighborhood like a respected man. Now he walked like someone who'd lost his skin. Diane, realizing Mark couldn't protect her, turned her fury back to me. She tried to force a public confrontation at our church on a Sunday morning. She approached me in the parking lot, dressed in her best coat, hair perfect again, eyes wet. "Michael," she said loudly enough for people to hear, "are you really going to do this to me?" People paused, heads turned. She wanted spectacle, sympathy, a stage. I looked at her, then at the curious faces, and I did the simplest thing. I spoke quietly and clearly. "You told me 2 of my children weren't mine and demanded half my money on my birthday," I said. "If you want to keep performing, do it somewhere else." Diane's face went white. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They just looked at her differently. That look is a kind of punishment on its own. The final part, the part that made this feel like justice instead of just survival, happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was in my office when my attorney called. "Michael," he said, Mark Holloway's company has requested certain information related to unauthorized access attempts and potential financial misconduct. My hand tightened around the phone. What kind of misconduct? He exhaled. It appears Mark used his position to attempt access to information he had no right to, and there's evidence he tried to initiate contact with your brokerage through an intermediary email. In plain terms, Mark hadn't only slept with my wife. He'd tried to reach for my money. He'd failed. But the attempt was enough to end him. That evening, Evan came over with his kids. Claire came too. We didn't talk about Diane, not much. We made dinner together, simple food, quiet laughter that felt fragile but real. My granddaughter Lily sat beside me on the couch and leaned her head on my shoulder. Pop, she whispered, are we still a family? I swallowed hard because that question almost broke me. Yes, I told her. We're still a family. We're just a family that tells the truth now. She nodded like she understood more than she should at 9 years old. And when she fell asleep there, safe against me, I felt something I hadn't felt since my birthday night in the study. Not happiness, but solidity. A foundation. Diane wanted half in control. Mark wanted ownership without responsibility. They wanted to turn my life into a lever and pull until everything valuable fell into their hands. Instead, they got exposure. They got consequences. And they got a man who stopped being polite. I still think about the moment Diane said, "They're Mark's," like it was nothing. I still wake up some mornings with that sentence in my mouth like poison. But I also look at my children. Yes, my children. And my grandchildren. And I know I made the only move that kept them from being trapped in Diane's lies forever. So tell me this. Was I right to burn it all down in front of everyone so the truth couldn't be buried again? Or should I have handled it quietly and spared the family the shock?
My grandpa's worst really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.